supervised by Dr. Daniel Fonseca, and I work in Leaf Sport on Peanut. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Fisher. I am a PhD student studying rural sociology and international agriculture and development, and I'm part of the Penn State and Savannah Agricultural Research Institute team looking at time poverty among groundnut farmers in northern Ghana.
Hello, my name is Magete. I am an agricultural engineer working at the Phoenix Breeding Program at Ferras. Thank you.
Greetings from Suffolk, Virginia, USA. I am Maria Ballotta, and I am the PI for the High Throughput Phenotyping Project.
Hi everyone, greetings from Kampala, Uganda. I'm Stephen Dwasa, working with Makerere University, the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. I work on the Photo Voice project, and here in Uganda, I work with Professor Akila Ukaya, Dr. David Okelo Karule, and with our two graduate students, Martha and Daisy. Our PI, Professor Carrie Stephens of University of Tennessee.
Greetings from Yankala, Tamale. My name is Doris Kavena Poza, and I work with the Time Poverty Project.
Hello, this is Mark Burrow in Lubbock, Texas, USA. Work on the project Breeding for Resistance to Leaf Spots, Tolerance to Water Deficit, and Selection for High Oleic Fatty Acids.
From Kitezbe, Lilongwe, Malawi. I am just a groundnut breeder.
My name is Dr. Edward Martin. I'm currently the head of the socio-economic unit of the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute, and I am also a co-PI on the Time Poverty Project, which is a collaborative research between Savannah Agricultural Research Institute and the Penn State University. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aissatou Sambu. I'm a peanut breeder. I'm working at ISRA at the peanut breeding unit based at Ferras.
I'm Venugopal Mendu. I'm an associate professor of cell biology at Texas Tech University. I'm the PI of this project.
And I'm Leslie Comey, a student working under this project. Our goal is to identify seed coat biochemicals which are responsible for aphid resistance.
Okay. We hope you all enjoyed those introductions. And in today's meeting, we are also going to have simultaneous translation available. And so to get us started today, I wanted to let you know how you're going to be able to enable that interpretation. And so we have two interpreters on our meeting with us, both Godlove and Luke. And I am going to ask Godlove to give you instructions in French as to how to enable that interpretation if you are needing it in today's meeting. Godlove, feel free to unmute yourself and share those instructions.
There's no noise.
Okay.
No
Godlove,
voice.
they cannot hear you. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues. Is Jessica on here? And I also have the instructions in French listed on the screen. But okay. For each of our attendees, down at the bottom of your screen, there is a globe that says interpretation. And if you click on that, you are going to see an option where you can click French, and it will automatically join you to that channel. Okay. And so if you do need to hear those instructions, once again, just click on that French channel and you will automatically hear our English presentations be translated to French. So we do have that as an option for today's meeting. So we wanted to be able to provide that to you. And now I'm going to turn it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. We're really glad that you could join us today. For those who don't know me, my name is Dave Hoisington. I'm the director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Peanut. And it's my great pleasure to officially now welcome you to the 2021 annual research meeting for the Peanut Innovation Lab. It was really great to see so many colleagues on our social time before we got started, and particularly the introduction videos. As we mentioned, we'll be showing some of those every morning before we get started, or just as we get started. So make sure that you tune in right around as close to 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time as you can, so you can see more of our colleagues introducing themselves. I also know that, of course, we all would have liked to get together in person this year, but I think while we all know that we're making, I think, good progress towards being able to start more traveling around the world and getting together in person, it just wasn't feasible to plan a meeting of this size at this time. I think we're all hopeful, though, that, of course, next year we'll not only be able to start traveling and seeing people, but as well, this meeting could be held in person. But, I think even if we can get together, I think we've come to understand that virtual meetings do offer some opportunities to have more participants be involved, particularly in a global program like ours. So I imagine that if we do have an in-person meeting, we'll have some sort of hybrid format so that we can allow as many participants to be part of the meeting by logging in virtually. I think we had over 115, I think, the last time we checked. Kristen registered for this meeting, and I was just looking, we're over 90 people on the call at the time. So I think, as I said, that's a really good thing that we've come to realize that Zoom meetings do allow. So we're really looking forward to everybody participating over the course of the next 3 days. To get us started, we would like you all to complete a very short poll question that you'll be finding on your screen. So if you could just give us your answer, you got about 30 seconds. The answers are anonymous, so be truthful in your answers. So we should be getting close to 30 seconds, Kristen. So great. It looks like we've got obviously a lot of years of experience and among all the participants, a rather large diversity, of course. But I think, not only are they participating with us, but they're also all part of our Peanut Innovation Lab. And so we're really looking forward to everyone's participation in our discussions. We have a different format for the meeting this year, but we really want to make sure that we can have you participate, provide your inputs as we look towards the last part of our program. We will be having a number of these polls over the course of the 3 days. So we hope you will all stay tuned and be ready to participate. Some of them will help us introduce some of the concepts and discussion sections that we'll be having. So stay tuned for more interesting polls.
They're doing polls now.
So I think the other thing that when we were thinking about this meeting that we've learned from probably too many Zoom meetings is that 3 days of basically the same kinds of presentations generally tends to lose the attention of most people. And so we tried to make sure that this meeting this year is going to be a little bit different than we've had in the past. And we've also tried to vary the agenda as much as we can. I think Kristen sent out the last version of our agenda. It's pretty much what we're going to be following in the next 3 days, so you can get an idea of what to expect. Normally we would be looking for updates from our over 20 active projects that we have. But we've also, and would have presentations from graduate students and probably talking about some administrative issues, et cetera, that we need to make sure everyone's aware of and dealing with. We think, of course, those are all still very important for us, things we want to continue to do. But we also thought that maybe to change the focus a little bit of this meeting and kind of talk about some of the more critical issues that we see arising out of discussions with USAID and some of the things that are being changed there, new strategies, new thinking. And that'll give us a chance to really begin to get your input into those ideas. We're still going to be having project update meetings, and you're going to be contacted by Kristen shortly so that we can figure out a good time to have those kind of project meetings and updates and discussions on a more focused manner here over the course of the next few months. We also think that we're now getting a lot of good results from a lot of our research that we would like to communicate more widely. And so we want to start organizing a number of webinars. And we think that'll be a much better, probably, vehicle by which we can communicate the results and have a discussion around them. And so we'll be working with all the projects teams to identify what are the really good topics, how we can put these together, and then to organize a set of webinars, perhaps monthly or so, over the course of the next several months, if not throughout the rest of our program. What we wanted to kind of focus on in this meeting was really to look at all the innovative technologies that we've been developing through our research and figuring out what do we need to be doing now and thinking about that really will make sure that those technologies have the most impact. I think that some things like new varieties, we are pretty straightforward. We have a good idea of how those can be best scaled out and scaled up and potentially have impacts. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of challenges, but we've dealt with a lot of those in the past and have a pretty good idea. Other technologies, like just gaining new knowledge and information through to understanding how gender and youth can best contribute to the adoption of new technology are much less clear. And so definitely USAID, other donors, all of us are putting a lot more emphasis on how do we understand those pathways earlier in the research cycle. And so that's going to be one of our focus over the course of the meeting, is to have a better understanding of the different innovations that we're developing and thinking about the pathways by which we can have impact with those and preparing for that as we go forward. Clearly, it's going to be a challenge. We're about halfway in our program, a little over halfway, but I think there is a lot that we can implement just to make sure that we understand what do we need to be doing to make sure that they'll be able to be scaled by our partners in the future. Our program, I guess, over the next 3 days, if you've seen the agenda, we'll have a lot of different sessions. We've invited 3 speakers to give us overviews of things like the latest developments in nutrition and health benefits from peanuts, talking about some of the applications of remote sensing, and some lessons that we're learning from our partnerships with USAID mission-funded programs. We're also going to be learning a little bit more about the thinking around scaling of technologies, the product life cycles, targeted product profiles, and how they can help us better focus much of the research that we're doing. I think we're all recognizing that gender and youth play an important component in agriculture and in peanut value chains. And so we're going to even have a panel discussion later today. It's going to kind of look at what we've learned so far and what still is unknown and how gender and youth can really help in improving groundnut value chains. We're not going to totally ignore the research that we're doing. And so we're going to have 3 of our grad students who've recently completed their research programs to present some of their research findings on Thursday morning. And finally, we've organized several breakout rooms where we think that there'll be smaller groups. Right now we have over about 95 people participating. And so that's hard to have a good discussion. So we're going to break up into smaller groups of around 15 people each. And get a chance to discuss about 7 different issues that we think are relevant at this time. So we hope that these kinds of different sessions breaking up will really create an interesting 3 days and hopefully be a little bit thought-provoking as we look to the future. Just before we kind of get started with the more formal program, just a few logistics. I know we've all attended Zoom meetings, so most of us know all this, but we've set this up as a meeting, not as a webinar where we can see everybody and ultimately hear everybody. I think, of course, given the connectivity issues around the world, make sure that you've got your camera off and your microphone off unless you're speaking so that we can preserve the precious bandwidth. As you heard at the beginning, we are offering simultaneous French translation for the duration of the meeting. We will have it for all of our sessions except for the breakout rooms. It was not possible to organize translation for all 7 breakout rooms. So we hope that our French speakers will be able to get translation if necessary, or we'll be able to chat in French, and we'll make sure that it gets translated appropriately. But you saw that how to do that, and if you have any questions, please make sure you contact Kristen. We're also recording all of our sessions. We won't be recording the breakout rooms, but we will be recording the main meetings. And so we'll be making those recordings available after the meeting. While we can all turn on our mics and speak, and maybe we'll be able to do that from time to time. Clearly, it was fun to do that before we got started. We will be using the chat room feature of Zoom. I see that a number of people are already beginning to chat. And we think that if you have any comments at any time, questions at any time, particularly during a presentation, feel free to type in your comment or your question to the chat. We'll be facilitating the Q&A after the different presentations. So we'll try to get to all the questions that we can. But if we can't, we'll definitely have a recording of the chat, and we'll make sure that any question that's been asked is answered as best we can and make that available to everybody who participated. So with that kind of quick introduction and overview, we'd like to, let's see, you've got that up already, so good. So there may be a few participants who, at least from the registrations, may not be quite as familiar with the Peanut Innovation Lab. So I'd like to just give a brief introduction to the lab and what we're about. So if you could go to the next slide. We're about 2/3 of the way along our 5-year program. Well, we started in early 2018 and we'll be finishing up around January of 2023 for our 5-year program. We've primarily focused on these 3 goals. Clearly, we're trying to apply the innovative science to improve peanut production, peanut quality, and its use. We're clearly aware of the important role that peanuts play in nutrition and health, and so we have projects looking at a better understanding of that role. And finally, clearly trying to address issues around gender and youth and their roles in the peanut value chain. Next slide. So a busy slide, but basically to tell you that our research is being conducted in primarily 4 African countries, Senegal, Ghana, Uganda, and Malawi. Although we do have activities and partners in several other African countries and in India. These partnerships involve right now 15 US partner institutes and 24 public and private partners in Africa and India. Currently in our database, we have over 200 colleagues that are working with us across all of these projects, including over 60 graduate students. Next slide. We have active 21 research projects currently underway. We've completed a number of our commission projects that we started in our first year of operation. And these projects are spread across our 4 main areas of inquiry, from applications of genomics in crop improvement to better understanding or developing better agronomic packages in value-added gains, understanding the roles of groundnut in health and nutrition, and exploring the roles of gender and youth in the peanut value chain. And some of the, don't have time to obviously go over all of the great innovations that we've already been developing and will continue to develop, but these range from new diverse germplasm sources that are now being made to programs in Africa to select from and use in their programs, better selection tools for traits that are very important for farmers in Africa. We're already released and will continue to release to a very active breeding pipeline, new improved varieties with better traits. We have now better recommended production packages that are being made available in various formats. We've developed some new school foods based on peanuts, and we'll be testing those and evaluating those impacts on nutrition and health. And I think we're, as we'll hear later today, a much better understanding of some of the gender and youth issues around adoption and how we can have better impact in our work. So as I said, we won't be able to hear about many of these in the meeting, but I can tell you that a major focus as we go forward over the remaining period of the program is to really make sure that all of our stakeholders hear more about them and that we'll be better placed to make sure that we can scale them for impact. The next slide. One area, though, that we did want to kind of make everybody aware of at this time is our efforts to really enhance the human and institutional capacity of all of our partners. I think this is one of the most important things that innovation labs do across the board is to really build the best institutions and build that human capacity for our future scientists and researchers and partners. So in addition to just providing a number of new selection strategies and tools for breeding, we also are in the process right now of sending some small scale shellers and grading tables to our breeding programs in Africa. These machines, which are pictured here, the latest versions of them were developed by Frank Nolan, who retired recently or a few years ago as the owner of Nolan Steel here in the US, who was a maker of and provided a lot of the peanut equipment in the US. And in our discussions with him and interactions with him in previous programs, he really felt that shelling peanuts is a bit unique in many ways and does require some specialized equipment, particularly that, and so he put it upon himself to develop some units that are more appropriately scaled for the kinds of operations that we're seeing both in breeding programs, but even maybe in village level shelling equipment. Develop these, optimize these for handling a wide variety of varieties, seed shapes and sizes. Made them both motorized, so for those programs that have availability to electricity, but also we have hand crank versions as well. And so we're basically providing a sets of these to our programs in Senegal, Ghana, Uganda, and Malawi at this time. And hopefully over the course of the next few months in this current cycles, they will be testing them optimizing them for the particular local varieties that they're working with, demonstrating them widely within their countries. And we'll be also already looking at how we could make sure that these could be even locally produced and maintained. So we think that these will hopefully be a really important component to make our breeding programs more efficient, and ultimately could be used in small-scale seeding operations and grading operations within the countries. Next slide. As I mentioned, we also have over 60 graduate students, almost 65 now between bachelor's, master's, PhDs, and postdoctoral fellows in the program. Have a pretty good gender balance. Many of them are masters, but I think we have a good number of PhD programs as well. And we're doing our best to support that. And a pretty good dispersion. Most all of our students are being trained in Africa at African institutions, which I think is really good. All being able to be linked with mentors here in the US when feasible. One of the things that we've implemented over the last, during the pandemic was an activity that Jessica and Kristen put together, and that is what we call scholarly exchanges. And these are monthly get-togethers by as many of the grad students that can participate. And they get to hear from a number of invited speakers on all kinds of various topics, things like career development, public speaking, kind of all types of issues that you probably wouldn't get in your normal courses that you would take as a student, but we think are pretty important as you look to your career after graduation. And I know that many of the students, I think, have been able to participate in this, and we encourage all of our students to take advantage of this. And we're also, obviously, last year we were able to have all of our a number of our graduate students make presentations on their projects. And as I mentioned, we'll hear from 3 of them during this meeting, but we're also going to be looking for opportunities over the next few months for all of our students to be able to participate and give updates on their projects. Next slide. So we've also been taking advantage of virtual learning. And so I'd like to ask Allison, who's our communication specialist, to introduce these over to you. So over to you, Allison.
Hello, you guys. I am really excited to get to talk about these 2 projects a little bit because we worked on them for about a year each. So it's nice to see these done and available to you if you are interested in them. About 18 months ago, about a year ago, we started some work with Scientific Animations Without Borders, a project at Michigan State, to create some simple animations that would reinforce some planting season and post-harvest best practices with groundnut. So to see what messages were really most important, we surveyed 18 partners in Malawi, and using a Qualtrics survey, we asked them, what do you think are the most critical points along the planting, in-season, harvesting, post-harvest process that we should reinforce through these animations? And we worked through that data and decided what were the most important messages, came up with some scripts, and worked with Sabo to create these 2 animations. Each one is about 5 minutes long. And you can see the points that we're trying to amplify. The audience here, the people we think would watch these, would be farmers or extension specialists, people that may have actually had some contact with this information, but this is also making it fun and reinforcing it. So our characters and sort of topography here are kind of a generic place. We used Malawi as a guideline, and we used a man and a woman We tried to be fairly realistic with the work they might be doing, the roles they might be playing, but without reinforcing any sort of gender roles, unhealthy gender roles. So we created these two to be released at the appropriate time during the season as kind of a reminder to people, and just recently finished the second one. So next slide. These are available on YouTube, on our website, and at salvoanimations.org. Here they can be downloaded in low res for social media sharing. One of the really interesting things about this is that they're fun enough that maybe farmers will share them with each other through Bluetooth or some other mechanism that requires a smaller file. Currently, we have them in English and Chichewa, both in a US English accent and also one that may be more recognizable to Africans. We also have a man and a woman speaking in the videos. We wanted to sort of preserve the opportunity to test and see whether women and men felt differently about information based on the gender of the voice that was presenting it. And we're starting to distribute them more widely through, say, blogs. We're hoping to do some website connection for radio stations, things like that. I noticed already there's a comment that says some points are missing from the videos. And that is a point. We could not say everything in a 5-minute video. That's why we chose particular messages that were brought out by our stakeholders. So that is the Salvo videos. At this point, we don't have any plans to make more. However, that could change. We might decide to do more based on the success of the animation. So if you have any ideas or want to talk about it, please feel free to approach me. I'd love to talk about it. The other project, and I've already run over, that we have been working and are excited to let you guys know about is the GroundNut Academy. This is a digital learning platform that we think can distribute all sorts of information about peanut, about groundnut. Digital learning had become much more of a player in learning even before pandemic. Some surveys showed that about half of college students had taken a digital course in the past year. This is pre-pandemic. And of course, once pandemic started and we all learned how much we needed to rely on digital platforms, it became even more important. So we created this digital platform, learning platform, where a student enrolls, basically. You just register with a little bit of basic information and then can select courses to take. Next slide. Yeah, so our initial course is a basic agronomy course. We are in the middle of completing an aflatoxin course, which should be rolled out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And after that, integrated pest management is on the agenda. The intended audience for these courses are students, probably students just beginning to work with groundnut. Maybe they are agronomy students, but groundnut is a new crop to them. Maybe they come from other disciplines and need to know about how groundnut is grown, but don't have a whole lot of depth in it yet. A secondary audience might be trainers who train farmers, extension agents, or people like that who just want to explore the information, see the latest that there is. So each course, as we've designed them now, would take you about 2 hours to take, but students can work at their own pace. So somebody may speed through it in an hour, somebody else may do 15, 20 minutes at a time and return over a 2-week period to complete the course. The courses allow for students to learn through different media. This image on the right hand of the slide is an actual screenshot from the course, and you can see how visually it's so much easier to understand pegging if you can see the flowers and then the actual process of what happens. Each topic and lesson has text, photos, can have video. Currently, we have lectures that are spoken by the instructor. So visual and audio learners both can absorb the information. The information is also searchable later. So if someone remembers a term and just can't quite recall all the information, that learner can come back and search and find what he's looking for. Each lesson ends with a quiz, and at the very end, there's a certificate that is populated with the learner's name and the date that they finished, so they can have personal bragging rights that they have completed courses with the GroundNet Academy. The platform maintains a profile for each learner so they can return and see their progress. If they have incompleted courses, if new courses have cropped up that they want to add to their knowledge base, it's all there for them. So right now, as I said, we have the 3 courses planned. We are constantly thinking about ideas for other courses, other topics that are particularly adapted to this kind of learning. So like with the Salvo videos, I would love to hear your ideas if you want to talk about potential courses, or if you might like to put together some material for one, feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Back to you, Dave.
All right, thanks, Allison. And we really look forward to everybody's feedback on both the videos and the GroundNet Academy. And of course, if you've got ideas for either, I'm sure Allison would be more than happy to receive those and hopefully work with you if you would like to develop a new course. The whole idea is that we could all contribute our knowledge, and it's a great place to capture that and make it available to a wider audience. So that's our brief overview of the Peanut Innovation Lab, and particularly some of the capacity building efforts that we've got underway. As I said in my kind of overview, we would like to kind of make sure everybody's kind of up to date on the latest thinking around USAID and what changes they've had, and particularly in structure, but also how some of their new thinking may affect our program going forward. And so Daniel Bailey has agreed to give us that update. Daniel is our Administrative Officer Representative, or AOR. Some of you may remember that he was our AOR at the beginning and then had to turn it over briefly to Siobhan Leonard. And so now he's been brought back in as our AOR, so we welcome him back. Daniel is the Agricultural Development Officer in the Center for Agricultural-Led Growth in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security in USAID. He's obviously has very interested in sustainable agriculture, watershed management. He's a Foreign Service Officer with USAID and previously served in Guatemala. Prior to joining USAID, he served in Tanzania with the Peace Corps as a high school physics teacher. So we've really enjoyed and look forward to having him part of our team and helping us as we go forward. Just a reminder to submit any questions for Daniel or comments in the chat box, and we'll try to address as many of these at the end of Daniel's presentation. So Daniel, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic updates. maybe not the ones you're about to hear, but the ones that you did just hear. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I apologize. I know that's millet. It's not peanut. I had to put this together last night, and I did not have a chance to update the photo. So we're almost, we're more than halfway there. The Peanut Innovation Lab is a 5-year activity, and we're more than 2.5 years through now. So I want to thank everyone for your persistence and patience and your enthusiasm for the work and all of the great research that you're doing. We're really excited at USAID about the research activities that you're working on and the findings. And we hope to see them soon. So the Peanut Innovation Lab is looked upon as one of our model innovation labs, particularly how it incorporates and intersects with private sector engagement. I think that in particular is very interesting to a lot of our folks in DC. We have, a huge focus on how do we engage with the private sector, in particular for research, because we see the private sector as the primary vehicle for scaling out all of the great research that you're doing. Gender and youth and gender, I can't emphasize gender and youth enough. We have a tremendous focus in Feed the Future on working with women and men and people of all ages, but particularly with younger folks and women. And as you make your work plans for the next year, try to think more about how your work impacts women and men separately, how it impacts young people separately, and look for opportunities to engage with other often marginalized groups. How will this work? How could a disabled person, of course there are many varying types of disabilities, but how could what you're working on be more influential to someone who is disabled in some way? Or how is what you're working on marginalizing someone who is disabled in some way that you could perhaps change your research a little bit or the output a little bit to accommodate that. Next, please. And the STAR format. When you're creating your work plan design for the next year, try to remember the STAR format. Where have we come from? What was the situation? What exactly will be done and by whom? And what results do you expect? Try to use direct action verbs as opposed to helping verbs. So instead of saying, we are going to assist farmers to improve yields, consider something a lot more specific, like 3 research assistants from the local NARS will train 35 farmers in varietal selection, proper seed spacing, and input rates with a target yield increase of 75%. That tells me pretty much exactly what you're going to do. Now here in the simplified example, I've left out considerations for women and youth, and I leave that to you to fill in. Next. Was there a next? I think that was it. You'll hear more from us tomorrow or Thursday on a new system of program management that we are implementing in innovation labs called the product life cycle. Many of you have already worked with product life cycles, perhaps through Crops to End Hunger and target product profiles, especially. I'll give an overview of that later in the week. It does not replace the research rack-up, the 4 phases of technology development that you currently report into. But the 4 phases overlap, or rather overlay onto the various stages of the product life cycle. So I just wanted to plug that for later. And with that, do we have any questions?
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Daniel, enter them in the chat. I haven't seen anything yet.
Well, I'll be in and out of the work plan meetings through the week, but feel free to submit your questions to the Innovation Lab Management Entity team, and they'll pass them along to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. I do see we have one question.
There's one about men and women were mentioned, and young people and disabled people. It seems to exclude older able-bodied people. I guess.
I'm sorry, David, I can't explain why. It's just the focus of our agency. We strive to meet the challenges of people who are most marginalized and not elderly, but middle-aged, older, able-bodied people are not men, are they do receive probably actually the majority of our assistance in those focal areas. And we find that really to make an impact at the household and community level, we have to be very purposeful in meeting the challenges of women and youth. Women, we've consistently find that the more that we can improve the lives of women, the faster we improve the lives of households overall and children and communities. So I guess I did explain why.
Good. One question from me, Daniel. As you know, we've put a lot of emphasis on the capacity, human capacity building, particularly with our students, and I think that still fits, I hope, within the overall priorities of USAID, but it also raises kind of a lot of different issues and challenges in terms of how do you put graduate training and the kind of flexibility that they need to have in terms of research into, say, product life cycles and more targeted goals. And that's a subject that we'll get in tomorrow when we start talking about those, but I'm just wondering, is the capacity building still a priority within AID going forward?
Absolutely, it's still very much a priority for us moving forward. Especially as a research program, you are in particular encumbered with the goal to ensure that the next generation of scientists are equipped in the countries that we're working in. I know that in particular in the last 4 or 5 years, even since I joined RFS from my last post, we've seen a lot of changes in how we can interact with students and graduate students. And all I can say is that I encourage you to continue doing the best you can to make sure that their needs are being met to the best of your ability. Thank you for being flexible these last few years in transitioning primarily from a focus on bringing students to the US to train, to training students in their home countries or regionally at institutions of excellence regionally. Moving forward, that will be the model. We want to build the capacity within the students themselves, and we want to build the capacity of those institutions to train students in excellent breeding practices and research practices. I encourage you to try to find hybrid solutions where They may be able to join researchers in the US for very brief periods of time, or to join conferences in the US or globally, to find ways to mentor students in other institutions and be on their advisory panels, and perhaps even to look for opportunities as exchange professors to universities there, and likewise for you who are professors in African institutions to be exchange visiting professors here in the US.
Yeah, well, let's hope that we can get back to some level of normality in terms of travel and ability to move around the world. It seems to be going in the right direction, but I agree that we've tried to do our best job to give those opportunities to our students to come here to the US and attend international meetings. And Lord, I think all of our scientists would love to be able to travel a little bit more than we have in the last year for sure, and take advantage of those opportunities to be in country. Good. Any other?
I guess one more thing. There was the comment about the smartphones, lack of smartphones rather, in rural areas. That's changing. That's changing very rapidly. And even if we don't reach all of our target farmers, these messages do filter down. And I wouldn't be surprised within the next 2 to 3 years that smartphone messaging in rural areas globally is commonplace. So lean into that a little bit, be on that forefront of providing services through smartphones. I'm not saying that this program will necessarily have the resources to add additional functionality like that to your research activities, given that the time left in the program, but keep those opportunities in mind.
Yeah, that was obviously the thinkings behind the Sabo video formats for one, and I know that we're already working through Sabo with a number of people within Africa that could blog about them, that could put them on radio or TV. So I think, yeah, but I agree, even with our partners in Malawi, I think there's a lot of opportunity to have them made available and shown in through phones, other technology. But yeah, it is rapidly changing. Good. Any other questions? All right. Looks like you got off the hook, Daniel.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, again. I look forward to reading the work plan for the next year. Yeah, enjoy the next couple days together.
Okay. Yeah, and like Daniel mentioned, we will have a discussion tomorrow on the product lifecycle ideas, and so I think Daniel will be giving us an overview of that. And we'll be hearing from some of our reading programs in terms of how they've been able to start to think about that and work on some of those concepts. So more on that tomorrow.
Yeah, and Dave, sorry, one more thing. Many of you may have been contacted regarding the research rack-up analysis that we're doing, and I want to thank you for your efforts to respond to those. I'm sure that the management entity, that Dave and the team have been working hard to try to minimize how much effort you need to put into that, and I thank them as well. And we are very interested in seeing how your technologies that you're working on are being scaled out. We're going back, a decade, maybe more in some cases, to the start of some other technologies that we've supported, to really start quantifying how our research dollars are impacting development goals, and also how these technologies are impacting agriculture here in the US. So I just want to thank you for all of the efforts that you have all been putting into that, and to please do your best to respond to those as they come in.
Yeah, let me just add my thanks to everybody too. Yeah, we understand how much work it is sometimes to fill out all those requests, but we do appreciate it. And we're trying to do our best to get that information up and keep it updated and keep adding to it. So we will continue to be in contact for sure. Okay, very good. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Look forward to your participation over the next couple of days whenever you can. That'd be great. Just looking at the program now. So I think we're going to get ready for our first invited speaker. But before I introduce her, we've got another poll. So please take 30 seconds and give us your answer. We definitely have a preference. I was wondering what that would be like. So definitely, we all like to eat peanuts in one way or another, but it looks like our preference is roasted, with peanut butter coming in second. So good, thanks for all your replies. And that's a good segue into our first invited speaker, Samara Sterling. Samara Sterling is the research director for the Peanut Institute based in Albany, Georgia. She has expertise in plant-based nutrition for the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases. As the research director at the Peanut Institute, she manages a number of research projects funded by the Institute and industry partners here in the US, develops research aims surrounding peanut nutrition research. She's also a researcher for clinical nutrition and lifestyle interventions. She's examining strategies to improve health in at-risk communities. She also serves as a nutrition consultant for various community-based research projects. And most importantly to us, she serves on our external advisory panel as part of our Peanut Innovation Lab, and provides a lot of useful input and thinking in terms of our nutrition projects, but in many of our projects in general. Samara speaks quite frequently at national, international conferences and events. She's passionate about translating science to consumer-friendly messages. She has a bachelor's degree from the Stony Brook University, a master's degree from Andrews University, and a PhD from the University of Alabama in Birmingham. Unfortunately, Samara isn't able to join us in person due to some other events, but she was very kind to provide a recorded presentation. Again, a reminder, if you have questions for Samara, please enter them into the chat. She's graciously agreed that if we can get her all the questions, she'd be more than happy to provide feedback by email on those. And so we'll do our best to make sure that any questions do get answered. But we really are excited to have her give us an update on the research that the Peanut Institute and everyone is doing to understand the really important role that peanuts play in nutrition and health. So welcome, Samara.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samara Sterling. I am a nutrition scientist and the research director for the Peanut Institute based in Albany, Georgia, here in the United States. I'm excited to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about peanut nutrition research. I serve on the external advisory panel for the Peanut Innovation Lab, and so I'm excited about all the research that many of you are doing. And in terms of where we go from here, I think that's one of the important conversations that we do want to talk about. So the title of this presentation today is Peanut Nutrition Research, Where We Are and Where We're Going. And in this presentation, I'll cover three basic areas. I'll just talk a little bit about the Peanut Institute for those who are interested, who we are and what we actually do. And then I'll talk about some of the current research and findings that we have, not just here at the Peanut Institute, but in the peanut nutrition world at large. And then I'll wrap up by talking about some areas of greatest research need that I think that we need to be looking forward to in the future. So the Peanut Institute is a nonprofit health and wellness organization that was formed in 1996, again, based in Georgia. And our mission is doing our part in creating a healthier world. We grow the awareness of the health benefits of peanuts and peanut products through targeted research and communication. So we have a research arm as well as a marketing arm. So we partner with various institutions and scientists across the world to conduct research in the areas of peanut nutrition. And really how this kind of came about, I always kind of like to start with this idea. Many of us can remember the low-fat craze of the 1990s where everyone was saying fat was the bad thing, fat was the worst thing that ever happened to our society. Now, where did that actually come from? And I think that really helps to give us some perspective as to why this work that we're doing is so important. Well, in the 1940s, that's when we started to see more and more that coronary heart disease was becoming the #1 killer of men and women in the United States. Sadly, it hasn't changed today. It's actually the #1 killer across the world. And during this time, scientific research started trying to identify some of the causes and recommend prevention. And this is where Dr. Ansel Keys in the 1940s came up with the diet heart hypothesis. Basically, we started to see research that showed that diets that were higher in fats, saturated fats, were indicative of higher risk of coronary heart disease. And so that was where this diet heart hypothesis came from, that basically said you increase saturated fat in the diet, that increases cholesterol levels in the body, and then that in turn increases a person's risk for coronary heart disease. Now, fast forward 20 years later, the American Heart Association started to recommend low-fat diets for those who were prone to heart disease. And this was prompted by another study that was done in 1961. Now, by the time we got to 1984, there was kind of a scientific consensus that low-fat diets may be appropriate not just for folks who were at risk for heart disease, but really for everyone except for babies. Now, as it often is in the scientific world, there are some scientists that were not really convinced of that data because a lot of that data was really epidemiological. We really hadn't gotten into the nitty-gritty of what we needed to look at as scientists. But before that research was really able to come to the forefront, we started seeing the media kind of capitalize on this idea. And so the media highlighted fat as bad for all. There was a public perception that fat in general was just negative, and the food industry responded to that. So you see this Time magazine article talking about how bad cholesterol is. And when you see McDonald's coming out with a low-fat milk, you know that's something that is really sort of in the public forefront. And this is what we started to see. And of course, it affected the way that people viewed nuts and peanuts in general, because peanuts and other nuts are high in fats, right? And so there was this idea that, oh, nuts are just fat in a shell, so stay away from it because it'll increase your risk for heart disease. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth, because in 1992, some emerging evidence from Loma Linda University from the Adventist Health Study showed that actually it's the opposite. Frequent nut and peanut consumption 4 times a week or more was actually associated with a 48% reduced risk of coronary heart disease. And this was really what kind of broke the needle, so to speak, and allowed people to think of nut and peanut consumption in a different way. And this is really why we need research like this, because unless we delve deeper into the scientific evidence, there's still a lot of questions that we will leave unanswered. You fast forward even to 2020, so many years have passed since 1992. And in 2020, we're seeing the same data. It's consistent, it's reliable, and this was a research that was just published last year from Harvard University that showed that if you increase total nut and peanut consumption over just a 4-year period, that's also associated with a significantly reduced cardiovascular disease risk. So this research is very much important in terms of helping the perception of folks who want to eat healthy but want to be able to find what are those health foods that I can eat to help with my health condition. So here's a survey from the International Food Information Council. They do a food and health survey every year where they survey thousands of participants and ask about their eating habits. And this year, one of the things that they found, consistent with years in the past, is that 60% of participants identify that they're trying to eat healthy in general, and 1 in 5 are actually seeking specific health benefits from foods. And one of the top 4 reasons that people are seeking foods for health benefits is heart health. So that continues to be top of mind for folks. There are other areas such as digestive health, weight loss and management, as well as energy and less fatigue, so the area of wellness. And when folks were asked what nutrients they think are contributing most to weight gain, what we see is that folks are really thinking of sugars and carbs nowadays, 40% or 42% sugars and carbs. And we're starting to see that the idea that fats are making us fat, that misconception that we saw from the 1940s onward, that's decreasing. It's continuing a trend downward. So we're seeing that people are understanding the concept of healthy fats, good fats, and recognizing that nuts and peanuts do contain those good fats, which are good for health. Here are some other hot topics in nutrition research that you'll see throughout this presentation as well. So there are 3 main areas that I've identified as hot topics, which you'll start to see more and more research on in the near future. The first is food as medicine, and this is really getting back to the foundational idea behind medicine, which is let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food, right? So nutrition research is really kind of getting into this space of how do we look at the ways in which foods not only help to prevent disease, but even manage and treat and even possibly reverse disease. That's a novel concept, though not necessarily novel, but it's coming up more and more in the research. The second is the relationship between food and wellness. So you saw from that IFIC survey that folks are also concerned about energy and satiety. That's another one. So that's the idea of, well, what if I don't necessarily have a chronic disease? What if I'm not really looking to treat disease and I just want to be healthy in general? How can foods actually help with that? So under that heading of food and wellness, you see areas such as fitness, the gut microbiome, cognition and mental health, reproductive health, skin health, as well as healthy aging. And then the third area is in dietary patterns and precision nutrition. So for dietary patterns, you're starting to see a lot more of how do we combine foods in such a way that benefit many areas of our body? So the reason behind this is very simple. We don't necessarily eat foods in isolation. We eat them together. And when we combine them, that synergistic effect of foods has a profound effect on our health, as opposed to eating just one food by itself. And so what is that good pattern that we can recommend to people that will help to promote better health? And under the area of dietary pattern research, here's an article that came out earlier this year from Today, and it's based on the Eat Lancet report that came out a couple years ago. Many of you are probably familiar with this idea that if we're going to feed the world's population by the year 2050, our dietary patterns really do need to change. In other words, we need to double our consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, as well as nuts, and that includes peanuts. And the idea is that a diet rich in plant-based foods will improve both human health as well as environmental health. And that's a really interesting place for peanuts, as particularly a plant-based protein source. As you can see here, when you compare peanuts to various other types of nuts, peanuts have more protein than any other nut. Per ounce measurement, that's about 8 grams per ounce of peanuts / peanut butter. And so when we talk about dietary patterns and filling our diets with more plant-based protein sources in order to confer health to both individuals and the environment, this really is a positive place to start. And I wanted to just show this graph here, or this table here, that compares not only the protein level of peanuts versus other nuts, but looking at even the amino acid composition of peanuts compared to other legumes, as well as almonds and cashews. And what you can see here is that per 100 grams, peanuts are higher in 85% of the amino acids than black beans, garbanzo beans, cashews, and almonds. And the stars, the asterisks there that you see, are denoting the essential amino acids. So peanuts really do contain a full array of those amino acids that we do need on a daily basis. And so it's a really good opportunity for nutrition science research. So at the Peanut Institute, we do have ongoing studies in these areas that I've been mentioning before. So all of the areas of food as medicine, as well as wellness, as well as dietary pattern research. So I wanted to talk about what we've actually been learning so far in each of these areas. As you will see as I go through some of these studies, many of these studies cover one or more areas, and that's a good thing, right? And we'll kind of get into that in a little bit. So what about the food as medicine concept? Well, here's a research study that came out a few months ago in November of 2020, and it was done by Harvard University, and the researchers wanted to look at how peanut consumption can affect risk for metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is becoming a bit more of a hot topic in the clinical world. It's a cluster of factors that increases a person's risk for heart disease and diabetes. And there are a few factors to look at with metabolic syndrome, such as high blood glucose, high blood pressure, high lipid profile, large waist size, and low HDL cholesterol levels. And what the researcher found here, it was a 12-week study where half of the participants were given peanuts, 2 ounces of peanuts to consume per day, and the other half was given an isocaloric rice-based snack. And the idea behind this was to see the effect that peanuts had on metabolic syndrome. And at the end of this research, at the end of 12 weeks, researchers found that those who consumed peanuts had a 2.33 higher chance of actually reversing their metabolic syndrome than those in the control group. Now, this is significant for a couple reasons. Well, number one is that there weren't any other dietary changes that were advised throughout this intervention. In other words, it really was just eating that 2 ounces of peanuts each day, a very small change that most people can do. And the second idea behind this is the fact that we're not just talking about reducing risk for metabolic syndrome now. We're getting into the space of actually reversing disease. And this is something that traditionally has not been well looked into. Again, as we talk about food as medicine, not just preventing, not just managing, but even being able to reverse with a small change. And that's really exciting research. Of course, we can't use it as the end all. There's more research that's needed in that area. The next step within this study is really a wellness focus in looking at the gut microbiome and how the bacteria that live within our gut can actually be associated with development of metabolic syndrome or even reversal of metabolic syndrome. Another area, this was a small study, it's really in its basic stages, that's looking at the potential of peanut skins as a remedy for Crohn's disease. And the researchers found here, it was a basic study again, and the researchers found that peanut skins are high in specific phenolic compounds that contain one or more A-type interflavin bonds. And these bonds are similar to what you find in cranberries, and it's the reason, one of the reasons that researchers think that cranberries are good for urinary tract infections as well as for Crohn's disease. And so these same compounds were found in peanut skins, kind of pointing to the idea that there may be some clinical benefits there. Again, preliminary stages for this research, but again, quite exciting. Again, with the food as medicine concept, here's a study from the University of Toronto in Canada. It's called the Portfolio Diet Study that basically uses an array of plant-based foods within the diet, focusing on soy, soluble fiber, nuts, peanuts, peanut butter, whole grains, oats, etc., and looking at this array of foods and how they affect cardiovascular disease risk. And again, this study is not just looking at preventing cardiovascular disease, but actually reversing signs of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, that buildup of plaque within the artery walls, can we actually reverse that plaque? And we've actually shown this in the 1990s with Dean Ornish. His study showed that it is possible to reverse cardiovascular disease with diet. And the Portfolio Diet Study is showing the same thing. A 3-year study. Right now, it's looking at MRI images to actually look at the arteries and whether or not that can be reversed. But just in a 9-month period, there was a 22% reduction in LDL cholesterol. And there was also a study that came out just earlier this year, last month actually, that associated the Portfolio diet with reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, as well as heart failure. So what about in the wellness space? I think this is one of our largest areas that we are looking into. And here's a study on fitness. And this study is using peanut powder. For those who may not be familiar with peanut powder, it's really just ground up peanuts where some of the fat is removed. And the purpose for that is to have a more high protein supplement. So in areas like fitness, for folks who want to build muscle, resistance training, this is really where that's targeted. And this study at Auburn University here in Alabama showed that just over a 6 to 10 week period of resistance training while including this peanut powder supplement had an effect on both muscle growth as well as quality. As you can see here from the charts, those who were in the peanut group improved their muscle thickness as well as their muscle strength. That's what you see there. And so that's quite exciting. They actually have another study that's ongoing right now. Can't necessarily share the results because it's not published just yet, but you'll hear about that in the future. And then, of course, one of the things that they also found was that those in the peanut powder group also had an increase in their diet quality. They consumed more protein as well as more fiber. But there are more studies that are needed in this area. Here's some exciting work that we're doing in the space of cognition. So here was a study that was done. It was just released this month, actually last week, and it analyzed close to 3,000 adults older, aged 60 to 80 years, and looked at the association between peanuts and peanut butter consumption and cognition. What the researchers found was that folks who did not consume peanuts or peanut butter were more likely to do poorly on cognition tests when compared to those who did consume peanuts and peanut butter. The limitations of this study were that it was cross-sectional and an epidemiological study, so we wanted to do this as sort of a complement to the clinical trials that we have ongoing. I'll give you a peep at one of those, and this is from the University of Barcelona in Spain, that looked at 63 healthy college students between the ages of 18 to 33 years old over a 6-month period, and looked at the benefits of both peanuts and peanut butter consumption on cognition. And they looked at areas having to do with memory, learning, not just cognition, but also mental health. So anxiety, depression, and cortisol. And the researchers found an improvement in all of these areas in those who consumed peanuts and peanut butter. Now, one of the things that you might be thinking as you hear this is, can peanuts and peanut butter actually help with not just cognition, but mental health? And what would be the scientific rationale for that? Well, it turns out that peanuts contain a specific phenolic compound called p-coumaric acid. And there are a few compounds within peanuts that we think are contributing to this. But there is research that was released in 2015. This was basic mechanistic research that showed that p-coumaric acid, this phenolic compound, actually has the ability to activate GABA, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain that regulates mood and decreases anxiety. And in this paper on p-coumaric acid, it actually showed that it may be an effective substitute for helping to treat depression clinically. So it's very interesting that we're seeing this translate not just on a basic level, but even translate to that 6-month study in college students. And that's huge because especially within the COVID era, mental health is one thing that's top of mind for folks. So again, when you're thinking of food as medicine, the wellness space, and how foods can actually impact our health in small but significant ways, this is one of the ways that we're finding here. And the researchers are also looking at the gut microbiome. This is a hot topic. So they're also going to be looking at the gut-brain axis and what clues we can find in terms of how peanuts and peanut butter can affect that as well. Here's another study. I'll go through the next few rather quickly. But this one was on weight gain, and the researcher here at Harvard University showed that long-term consumption of peanuts and nuts is actually protective against long-term weight gain. So again, when we talked about cardiovascular disease and how folks were thinking, oh, it's fat in a shell, it'll make you gain weight. Actually, the reverse is true. We don't necessarily say that peanuts will help you lose weight, that you will lose weight when you consume peanuts, but it'll help you maintain a healthy weight and protect against obesity in the long run. There are a few reasons for that that we can actually talk about in our discussion. I won't get into the details there, but that's exciting research. And again, here's another gut microbiome study that's happening as well. What about dietary pattern research? I'll talk about one of those, which is the Mind Diet study. You've heard me talking about cognition quite a bit, and this particular study is a 3-year clinical intervention that takes components of both the Mediterranean and DASH diets and takes foods that are considered to be brain foods, so berries, leafy greens, nuts, peanuts, peanut butter, and looks at the effect of this diet on cognitive decline as we age. And early research from the Mind Diet shows that eating this combination of foods regularly is protective for fighting cognitive decline. It's associated with a 53% lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, and it's actually recognized as a potential therapeutic agent in clinical settings. Now, looking at both peanuts and peanut butter specifically, they're both excellent sources of niacin as well as good sources of vitamin E. And in separate studies, both of these nutrients have been found to lower Alzheimer's disease risk by 70%. Now, this is really crucial for Alzheimer's disease because we know that the drugs for Alzheimer's disease are 99.9% ineffective. So they don't work at all. And so there's really a lot of talk about if we're going to prevent Alzheimer's disease, it really has to start with prevention through lifestyle and dietary habits. And this is what we're finding here. So we do find within this research that a daily serving of peanuts and or peanut butter may help to contribute to optimal brain health. Here's another one on Parkinson's disease, finding positive results there. And then a new finding that came out last month. This research showed that higher Mind Diet scores are also associated with better cognitive function as well as larger total brain volume. So I want to wrap up by talking about where we actually go from here. We see all this amazing research that's being done. What are some of the areas that we need to be thinking about? Well, those 3 hot topic areas that I talked about before, I do think that they're going to continue to be important, as well as the idea of plant-based proteins. That's something that's not dying down. But as I talked about in the MIND diet, there is a second phase of that study that's looking at the MIND diet adherence on how it can help to improve cognition in stroke patients. We know that stroke patients often suffer from reperfusion injuries, which is a lack of oxygen to the brain following a stroke, and that can impact cognition. So this is a 2 to 3 year intervention with 500 participants, asking them to eat 5 ounces of nuts, peanuts, peanut butter weekly, and seeing how much it can help in terms of stroke. Another area that I think is really important for us to look into, because of the recent dietary guidelines that were released in the United States a few months ago, are peanuts for children, starting them early with good nutrition. The reason for that is that we do know that peanuts, protein foods, peanuts and other nuts do contain key nutrients that are needed for the rapid brain development that occurs through an infant's first 2 years of life. And so looking at those areas of research, we don't really have a lot of research in that area, so that would be important as well. And I think one of the other areas is nutritional breeding. So when we talk about feeding the future, we know that there are specific nutrients that play a role in terms of malnutrition. And those are the nutrients that we do need to be targeting specifically within the first 1,000 days of life. And for us in the peanut industry, as well as for those of us who are studying peanuts in the various capacities, we need to be looking at ways in which we can maintain the current nutrient values in peanuts, as well as identifying potential nutritional breeding targets for the future to make sure that as these nutrition needs continue to become more and more prevalent in the future, that we will be able to have ideas about how those needs can be met as we engage in nutritional breeding with peanuts. I've talked about plant-based proteins, and I think the only thing I'll say here is that innovation is needed. We do need more of the innovation within this space, because as folks are looking, and I'm not necessarily talking about vegetarian diets or vegan diets, but plant-forward diets that include plant-based protein sources. So what are those ways in which peanuts can be used as that source of plant-based protein within a flexitarian diet, within a Mediterranean MIND diet that we can recommend in a clinical setting? As I wrap up, I just want to invite you to visit our research library on our website. It includes hundreds of studies on a variety of topics related to peanut nutrition. Obviously, there's so much that I could not cover here today. I have limited time, but I welcome any of you to shoot me an email, talk a little bit more about the research that we do have ongoing. And then we do have a Science Made Simple series on our website as well that really looks at how peanuts function throughout the body in areas such as diabetes, heart disease, I mentioned cognition, as well as fitness, quite a few areas that we have with this series as well. So what are some of our future aims? I didn't talk much about cancer studies, but that's one of the areas that we do need because most studies are done in animal studies or cohort studies. So we do need clinical studies that look at how peanuts and peanut butter can impact cancer outcomes. Personalized nutrition in diabetes management, so long-term glucose control in diabetes, food as medicine, as well as just living a better quality of life in general. So many of us would like to be free from chronic diseases, and we want to make sure that we are eating the foods that can help to facilitate that. So thank you very much for your time. I am here. Again, I have placed my email address there, as well as my phone number, as well as the website for the Peanut Institute. And you all can feel free to reach out to us at the Peanut Institute for any discussion points that you may have. And I think for just the Peanut Innovation Lab in general, I think that we need more research in the area of peanut nutrition across the world, because various populations have various needs and we need to be able to identify those. And I think just having a good starting place where we see where the data currently is and where we need to go next is going to be really important. So thanks again for having me, and thanks again for the opportunity to talk with y'all. I'm here if you ever need me, and I hope that we continue to have a good conference.
So thank you very much, Samara. Really appreciate her taking the effort to record that presentation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I think as we all know, but I know we've been stressing over the course of our program how important peanuts are from a nutrition and health benefit perspective. I think she's given some really good evidence of what's now known and where some of that research is going. I think there's been, just remind everybody, if you have any questions for Samara or want to make any comments, there's really been some good comments already and questions in the chat box, but feel free to put them in. Some of the questions I think are more just good comments that all of us will need to be thinking about. We will be having some further discussions on what kinds of activities in peanut nutrition we should be undertaking or recommending to USAID as we go forward. That will be the subject of one of the breakout rooms that we'll be having starting tomorrow, and another one that will be conducted on Thursday. So those of you who are participating in those will be able to capture all of those ideas as well, but everyone will be able to submit ideas. I think if people have been following the discussions, I think there's been some good comments. You know, one comment in general that we all are aware of is, of course, you know, peanuts not only have good qualities, but like everything, they also have some negative features, and aflatoxin is definitely one of those that we always have to keep in mind. And clearly that is a focus of a lot of our research, particularly in how to produce quality peanuts in the field and maintain their high quality throughout the whole processing and manufacturing process. And so clearly are important things to keep in mind. I think related to that, of course, were some comments Isa made, and something that we fully support here at the management entity is we know that a lot of the breeding activities have, of all programs and lots of crops, have focused more on quantity than on quality. We look at diseases and how to better produce a crop in the field. But we think that for all crops, and particularly in peanut, figuring out what do we need to be doing to understand the nutritional composition and quality of different varieties would be quite important. We've all heard about high oleic peanuts, and so clearly that's a focus of some of our programs now around the world. And so I think that we need to have a discussion on what we could do there. And we're looking at what we could also support in the remaining period of our program. And so we're looking forward to thinking more and hearing from everyone as to what could be that focus. I think a lot of the questions that Samara could probably ride us on, and probably some of us as well could think about all this research that's going on in terms of looking at health and nutrition benefits. Does it need to be repeated? How can it be repeated? What needs to be done to look at it in the African context? We know diets are different there, et cetera. So foods are different. And so I think there is a lot that could be done and probably should be done going forward. I think even within USAID, I think there's a much more appreciation for the fact that, or we're all appreciating that we need diversity in diets. We need diversity in food systems. And so this opens up some good opportunities for us to think about. I think we can take a few more comments and questions. If anyone has them, if someone would like to turn on their mic and say something, we do have a couple more minutes before we need to break. We'll have our first break. And whether I could call on, is Daniel on the line at the moment?
Daniel is online, and JS also is prepared to go ahead and ask a question.
Oh, okay. Jess, over to you. JS is actually leading one of our nutrition projects on gut microbiome effects in work in Uganda.
Yeah, you see, personally, I don't know too much about the Peanut Institute. Looks like they have their own research branch, or do they also can fund in some projects, or just they collect the informations? Yeah, that's you know better than me, because for many years I heard a lot about they organize like a field trip or those connected with peanut, like the innovation lab and previously Peanut Crisp. There's a lot of activities in, but I'm just want to clarify, do they support research or do they fund in research?
Yes, the Peanut Institute is primarily focused by the U.S. peanut industry, but then they put out calls for proposals, and then they support research programs. I think primarily through one-year projects, but some of these projects, of course, go on for longer than 1 year. So they do have a research portfolio.
Okay, that's good to know for that, because I had a long time, for many years, thinking about that, because I was training as a nutritional psychologist.
Good.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I'm sure that Samara can provide you more details
Yeah.
if you want it, and she'll make sure that she does that. So good.
I have those emails. Thanks.
Okay, good. So I think we're doing pretty well on time, actually running a little bit ahead, but I think that's good for a first day. So I think I'm going to, again, just thank Samara for her presentation, and I'm sure she'll be excited to see all the comments and questions, and we'll make sure that we get you answers to those from her just as soon as possible. As I said, we will be having a couple of more breakout rooms to talk about nutrition. Mark Maneri has kindly agreed to help moderate those. And he's also the PI of one of our projects in Ghana to look at the role that peanut-based school foods can play in cognitive learning, something that Samara mentioned in terms of one of the benefits too. So we'll look forward to those discussions starting tomorrow and on Thursday. So I think at this point, we can take a break. We're running a little bit ahead, but so maybe we could get started about 11:50 our time, so in about 10 minutes from now, but give everybody a chance. We do have, during the break, we'll have a slideshow from all the different slides that everybody contributed, and we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Enjoy. All right, very good. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the slideshow. We've got, we'll be showing a collection of those slides that we received. As Allison said, we were swamped almost by the number of slides that were sent in, and Allison's done a really good job of pulling those all together. And so we'll have two more presentations in our breaks on tomorrow and on Thursday. So we'd like to now start our panel discussion, and we're going to be focused on, as I mentioned in my introductions, hearing a little bit about what we've learned and what we're learning about the roles that gender and youth play in the peanut value chain, some of those lessons, some of our thinking on how well we've been able to capture gender and youth research in the Peanut Innovation Lab. As we know, we're one of the few labs who actually are investing almost a quarter of our research support in specific projects looking at gender and youth, and in addition to the work that we do to make sure that all of our projects incorporate gender and youth into them. So it's another unique opportunity that we have, and I think we're also learning from that experience. And so we want to have kind of a good open discussion among individuals who are actively participating in those projects to end up today's sessions. So I'd like to, while we're hoping that Jessica would be, before we do that, thank you, Kristen, you reminded me, we have one more poll. So please take about 30 seconds to answer the current poll on whether you think groundnut is a woman's crop. All right, the results, I guess not surprising given the three answers. Clearly, whether it is a woman's crop will depend on the context, and maybe our panelists are going to explore this in a little bit more detail. I appreciate your feedback on that. So I'd like to now introduce the moderator for this. Jamie Rhoads, who's our assistant director, is going to be moderating. Jessica had hoped to be able to do it, but unfortunately she wasn't feeling well this morning. She'll be listening in and maybe participating, but Jamie is the assistant director of our Peanut Innovation Lab, and he will take over and introduce the panelists. So over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And yeah, hopefully Jessica will be feeling better. She was kind and sent me her notes and questions and things. So I know she was excited about this panel, as we have been, all of us, as we've been thinking about the annual meeting. And part of it, I think, our interest in thinking about the role of social science in the Innovation Lab is that while certainly, using social science tools and lenses for thinking about agriculture and development is not new, I think in some ways our application of, and the cross-disciplinary use of different disciplines being applied to innovation labs is fairly unique. And I think some of it is due to the fact that we have gender and youth as both a cross-cutting theme, which is common across all the USAID programs really, but also that we have it as a focus area, as Dave was saying. And because of that, I think we got a lot of different kind of communities of practice interested in innovation labs that maybe weren't in the past. And we got introduced to some new institutions and new ways of thinking about questions. And it gave us a lot of new tools to think about research and interdisciplinary research. And so that's really what prompted our thinking about the reason for having this panel. Other things that really came into mind is that while we have a lot of really great research developing new technologies, we still see a lag in adoption and scaling and impact, I think are things that we certainly at USAID is interested in us thinking more explicitly about. And I think that's going to be a challenge also within social science disciplines to think about our sort of knowledge products and thinking about, you know, some of the things within a product life cycle are perhaps more straightforward if you develop a variety or some new, you know, tangible gadget. But if you're doing surveys and maybe just thinking about things differently, it's not quite as straightforward. So that was part of our thinking in bringing on the panel. Rather than me introduce everybody individually, we have a nice cross-section of panelists from different disciplines and different projects. I would prefer if everybody will go one at a time and introduce themselves and, you know, their institution, where they're coming from, and a bit about their project, and then we'll jump into some of these questions and certainly you know, any observations and things that come along, and please everybody do add chat questions and we'll try to circle around to them. So maybe I'll just pick first to make sure as we go and switch. We'll just follow the panel here. And Carrie Stephens from the University of Tennessee, maybe if you could go first, and then Pierre, and we'll just continue down those pictures if that works for everybody. Is Carrie on there? If not, maybe we'll
Pierre is available. Pierre,
Okay.
if your audio allows you, will you please take a moment to introduce yourself and your background momentarily?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Pierre Diatta. I'm from Senegal, and I'm working as a co-PI in the project Retaining Next Generation Farmers in Senegal. For the project, we're trying to look at all the constraints that face youth in general in terms of agricultural peanut.
All right, thanks, Pierre. Maybe we'll go to Sari now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sari Blakeley. I'm from the US and I'm working at UCSB in collaboration with CERDIS in Senegal on time use and specific gendered time use in peanut agriculture to better understand where there's gaps in best practices.
Thanks, Sari. And Paige?
Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Castellanos. I'm here at Penn State, where I work primarily with our Gender Equity Through Agricultural Research and Education initiative. My background's in rural sociology, and I'm also serving as a co-affinity lead for gender in the new USAID Feed the Future cross-cutting themes community of practice. That's a mouthful. And I am a co-PI on a project between Penn State and the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute in Ghana. The PIs are Leland Glenna and Edward Marty, and we're looking at time poverty and amongst smallholder women farmers in northern Ghana.
And unfortunately, I guess Carrie's not on there. Maybe if someone, I see Tom Gill here is from the project. I'll put you on the spot, maybe if you want to contribute. Carrie's project is an interesting one, using the particular method called photo voice, and working with students in a couple of different disciplines. Looking at students coming from food science and ag economics, and then using this different methodology that's a bit outside of their normal disciplinary realm. So it's been, in our conversations with her, it was very interesting to think about it within the project as well of what they're learning. And I think that was part of my first question, was really to help if some of the panelists could talk about how they think their sort of social science lenses are useful in helping the biological or physical science folks think about their work differently, or maybe some specific examples as well of things that they found useful in the startup of their projects. So maybe I'll go across the board again, and we'll start. Maybe Pierre, if you have specific examples and things to talk about.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I have like a low internet connection, so I won't be able to turn on my video on this. That's an interesting question. As a social scientist, as you can know, our job is to adapt to the new technology that has been developed, by our technician in order to fit the need of farmers in the country, in the area of study. So for that, I think that we need to understand like a lot of aspects of that area, such as like the cultural part of the area of study. For instance, I can give like an example of one time I got like one of my colleague that developed like a new technology, but that technology is not the need of people, such as that's a new variety of rice that has been created, but unfortunately that rice is not really tall as the one that we used to grow in our country. So because of that, that even if the productivity of that new variety is pretty good, it doesn't give the incentive of those people to adopt that technology. So for that, to come back like to the question is, the new technology that has been created need to be not only better than the previous one, but it should fit also the cultural aspect of people that's going to use that technology.
Certainly, yeah, context and thinking about it. Maybe Sari, do you want to, if you have some thoughts on that, the application of social science and how we work together, I think, with physical biological science.
Yeah, to echo Pierre's thoughts, it's really, there's been a lot of different technologies that have been developed, a lot of different policies that have been implemented with an intended cause. And you don't see that effect necessarily happening if the cultural and social aspect isn't taken into account. I mean, I can think of a lot of different projects that had unintended consequences where the people who were supposed to benefit did not ultimately benefit from the new technology because their needs and their uses of whatever that technology weren't actually taken into account. And so the social science, I think, is really there to help establish what is needed, like how do we get this technology into the hands of someone who needs it, and how is that going to benefit them? And without that aspect, who knows what could be the outcome of it? And so I think it's really important to have the social science there, along with these hard scientists, the STEM scientists, to work together to really make sure that the technology has its intended consequences.
Paige, go ahead. We can be kind of freewheeling, guys. You're welcome to crosstalk if you like as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, this is a kind of a really important question. I think broadly, if we are ignoring the social context, you know, like Pierre and Sari mentioned, you know, we're going to miss out on a lot of kind of information that's going to inform our research more broadly. Actually, Leland Glenna shared with me that has a recent article where he's discussing this exact question, thinking about the importance of social science in this context. He's done a lot of work on sociology of science and technology. I think personally, we can even push ourselves even further to move beyond seeing people as recipients of technology transfer, but as actually active participants in our agriculture and food systems. You know, as researchers, whether in social sciences or the bench sciences, focusing on engaging communities and understanding their situations, the structures and institutions that influence their conditions can help inform better science overall. I think another important aspect to social science research is that without it, we wouldn't be able to understand power differentials that create and perpetuate inequities. I think without this understanding, we would not really be able to address some of the largest development problems that we're all interested in, like food security, especially for those who are most marginalized. And I know Daniel was already talking about that earlier today. So for example, in our project, we're looking at time poverty and thinking about if we want to think about how to promote peanut production in northern Ghana without really understanding the role of gender, the gender differences in labor of peanut production or farm resources, access to resources, we really wouldn't be able to address the issues at all. I think if we ignore gender inequities, we wouldn't be able to have widespread improvements to food security or nutrition that I know is kind of central tenets to the peanut IL and the ILs in general.
Are there maybe some specific examples of the project, you know, within your projects as you've gotten started about where those collaborations have happened? And part of it's my thinking about, you know, as an innovation lab, how can we foster better interdisciplinary you know, function, and sometimes that has to happen really early on in the project, and it's not always that easy. That's kind of an open question to anybody on the panel for sure.
I mean, I would completely agree with what you're saying, that it should be early on in terms of best case. I think having strong interdisciplinary teams comes over time, and it can also present a lot of challenges. So working with teams over longer periods of time, I think helps overcome some of those barriers. I mean, I think that a great thing is to have it included in RFAs and really kind of prioritizing and rewarding in terms of the evaluation, which I think, you know, is a strong aspect of what the PNIL is already doing. You know, from our projects, when we're looking at peanut production in northern Ghana, we've had great experiences in terms of cross collaboration of projects within the IL. I think also, you know, we can't do our farmer field schools that we're working on. So we're working on gender integrated farmer field schools and looking at time poverty within those and time poverty alleviation within the household. And so, you know, the technology aspects of peanut production and gender related content go hand in hand. And we kind of, you know, share those with community members and work with community members on both aspects. And so I think it's really important to have those really closely intertwined.
I'm totally in phase with you, Jamie. That's an excellent strategy that, you know, the bill has used, right? The bill has used the collaboration between partners. That's a very important aspect. It helps like people, even researchers, to be like around us from different background, you know, to be around the table and to discuss about one issue. And that's a very efficient way to find better results for instance, for our research, about about the retaining next generation farmers, we were during our implementation of the survey. We got like other people from another area, for instance, people from Ceras, Ikenside, Isafai or Da Fonseca. They help us like to make in place or to implement, to give like some questions that are really important for the survey, not only for us, but for them, because it will give them like an overview of what is happening on the field. And because of that collaboration, we will get our part, our result, but the other part will also have like his result and what they are looking for. And I think that's something that need to be, that need to be improved, that need to be done frequently, to have like other people from different backgrounds to integrate, or to have like a team, a mixture of team for a better result of our projects.
Yeah, I know, for example, just in developing the survey tools and things, that it's been very valuable across several projects to have back and forth between, say, the breeders, for example. I know the case in Senegal where, we had questions about varieties and which ones were being used. And in the survey really showed some very interesting data, but the interpretation of it was limited because perhaps the social science team wasn't, as deeply familiar with which varieties were used, why, and how they were named and so forth. So almost to kind of turn that initial question, my background coming from being trained as a social scientist, I always feel like, oh, we got to justify ourselves in the world of like an innovation lab where a lot of it is sort of STEM driven. But I like to think of it in the other ways too, of like, what is lacking among social scientists to really understand some of the other STEM things, and how can we try to address that a bit? That's been a conversation we've had within the lab too. And some of it gets back to a little bit to your point, Paige, about having these long-term relationships that help develop the context within the group. And certainly we're getting started with some newer institutions that maybe don't have a long-term history in peanut research. Thoughts? Sorry, I don't mean to ramble as moderator.
I mean, I'm on the same page as you. We're coming from a place where we aren't experts in peanuts. And so there's been a lot of collaboration between our team and both the peanut lab and then also some of the other PIs that are doing their own projects, just because we want to make sure that when we're asking questions in the field, we're asking the right questions. And I think that's probably the advantage of having the social scientists doing a project alongside the more hard science researchers, because we're able to like collaborate a lot more, especially with the peanut lab overarching all of these projects. I know that Jessica and you have pointed our group several times to different people who we can ask questions to, and we've been able to communicate with them frequently and talk with them about like making sure we're asking the right questions about best practices or aflatoxins. So our survey will actually have an impact and we'll get the information we want from the farmers.
And I think, if we're talking about team development, this is also another time where it's just really important to recognize the importance of having really collaborative partnerships with in-country institutes and people at different in-country institutes from the US perspective. And so I think, really bridging the local context, the local scientific knowledge in both social science and bench science, and having those partnerships be really strong, I think is really important for us.
So thinking about the next question is really about identifying some emerging themes that you guys, in particular, some of you, not actually across our panel, none of you were involved in the previous innovation lab or in peanut research. And I'm curious about things that you've learned early on, kind of emerging issues and thinking about future research, because certainly, you know, research always kind of begets more research. So yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of opportunities. Like, it's almost like everywhere I look now, I see an opportunity to do what we're doing with different projects, different disciplines. We're looking more into doing like aflatoxin research and gender research together as part of our small group's next focus forward. And so, I mean, this has been like a starting point for us where we're just looking forward to more and more gender research in hopes that the gender research that we do will have real impacts on both policy and interventions, as well as potentially having both the hard science and us inform each other on future research projects. I should also say that groups within this Peanut Innovation Lab have also been people we've been looking for collaborators as well in future research projects too.
So I think for us, I mean, other than the challenges of dealing with the global pandemic, but I think, you know, we've been able to do a couple of waves of survey data collection in our communities. And so we've found, I mean, one of the main takeaways is that men don't recognize women's contributions to farm labor, to peanut production, to agriculture in general. Another thing I think is that time poverty is a major issue in terms of participation in agriculture, and it's particularly gendered. That changes over seasons as well. So we're still doing some of this analysis, but those are kind of our main takeaways. I think another important aspect is just the importance of community participation, and in that, you know, communities really kind of know what they want or need in a lot of ways. And so how can we work more hand in hand with the communities to be more participatory in our research? I think for the future going forward, you know, looking at the relevance of what we're finding in our both data collection, but also applications of the farmer field schools. What's the relevance for other parts of the region, but also across different parts of the global South. And so I think, you know, when we're thinking specifically about time poverty or time constraints, thinking about other ways to alleviate time constraints and how it's not just the time that's spent in agriculture that can be kind of burdensome, but also just in general, household labor and reproductive labor that is particularly heavy for women. And what can our projects do to both address those issues, but also not add to the time constraints? And so those are kind of some of our main takeaways and areas that we're interested in looking at in the future.
For one issue that is really important for during our project, I think that the aspiration of people of your target should be captured in order to know exactly where we are going. For instance, about youth in Senegal. In the rural area, maybe the youth don't like the same aspiration as you thought, and that those issues may mess up a little bit. You know, the way we are thinking about, you know, helping them, and the way we are setting up our project. Another issue as well that I'm thinking about is what people are thinking about you coming as a surveyor. I'm gonna give like a specific example of that for that one. For instance, you can reach a village, and whenever they see you as a surveyor, they are thinking about, you know, a project coming to help them. So, you know, with that conception and all that kind of stuff, you may have like a issue of having the real data that is really needed for a better impact. Because I have one of my parents who came up to me because as our second year of our survey, one of my parents came to me and said that you came here last year. This year, uncle, you are again here without nothing like on your hand and all that kind of stuff. You know, that kind of stuff. They're still waiting like some stuff from you, and sometimes it can be like some problem that may face a researcher on that area. So whenever you are doing, a researcher is doing like a following survey, he should be like careful about this situation.
Yeah, and related to that, one thing I remember we talked about in our sort of preparation discussions is how some of our projects are looking at you know, these little moments in time through a survey methodology, and others are looking at them really long-term, you know, and continuously engaged. And I'm really interested in seeing some of the results. And related to that, I'll introduce Carrie. And so Carrie has joined us. And I know when we talked, I think we had given her the previous agenda, which we had switched around many times due to people's availability and time slots and things. So I apologize to Carrie, and I appreciate you jumping on last minute into the middle of a panel discussion. So maybe Carrie, if you could introduce yourself and talk a bit about your project, and we'll loop back around to some of those questions.
Okay. So my name is Carrie Stephens, and I'm a faculty member at the University of Tennessee. On a team with other PIs and Makerere University, looking at photo voice methodology and how that can be used to empower youth, and also empower youth involvement in the peanut value chain.
And Carrie, I'll just jump back to the first question, because it's really at the core of what we're talking about in some ways, is thinking about the relevance of your work. And in particular, I was thinking of your project because you're working with these students from different disciplines. And I thought maybe you could tell us or talk a little bit about how that has worked, and maybe some challenges that you've overcome or continue to deal with in some cases too, about working from the perspective of a more, you know, quote unquote soft science.
Yeah, so we are using, like I said, the photo voice methodology, utilizing phones for the youth to take photos as they actually work or are engaged in the peanut production and groundnut production. So we have been tracking them for the first peanut season, and their responsibility is to take photos and put captions on them as they see either their involvement or as they think about the value chain systems. And so obviously some challenges when we first started using that is, you know, how do we get the youth the phone with COVID and all of the training? But our team at Makerere has done an amazing job to go out and do the training and get those youth engaged and started. And we have, the team has been going out collecting those photos, and then also doing focus group interviews on what the youth are capturing and some of the challenges that they see as far as being powered in this process. So it's been really awesome. And I think the opportunity to use the social science research has given them a voice to capture those photos, tell us what they're capturing, and then also be able to express and explain that process and in that value system and what that means to them. And then we also have combined that with a survey to also look at positive indicators on goal setting, what empowers them as far as where they're at. So we've used a combination there so far to really try to capture the voices of the youth.
So one of the big objectives of this panel, and part of the reason we ended up switching a bit on the time schedules, was we really wanted to think about collectively about how to turn social science research products into this, and thinking about this product life cycle. And of course, our agenda switched up, so we haven't had a clear introduction or some time to process that that thinking that's coming from USAID. But very briefly, we're thinking about like the research outputs. How do we, for lack of a better, think about them for scale and impact in a way that my brain keeps coming back to the word commercialization, but that's not really what I mean, but like scaling, kind of promoting it, understanding where that research fits. How do you turn it into what kind of products do we turn it into? And I guess I'll throw it out there too while we're thinking about it, just to stir some conversation, but also thinking about many social sciences are not just applied sciences, but we're thinking about things from a critical science, critical theory perspectives about things. And I wondered if you guys would talk also related to thinking about that impact pathway and application of social sciences. Where is the role of critical science fit into your thinking about the project, and how does that balance out? So that's a big question, obviously, but maybe if and I'll turn it loose to whoever wants to jump in first. Maybe it's too big of a question. Do I?
I mean, I think it is a really big question, and but an important one too. I mean, I think both are really essential and important in terms of critical and applied research. I think when you're talking about products or however you want to call it, a big both barrier and opportunity for social science research is to translate what we're finding and what we're studying into something that can be used for policy recommendations or used to be more institutionalized at the government level at higher levels. And so it's hard because I wrote down here in my notes, social science research is complicated and messy. As Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it, when human behavior enters, it's when things go nonlinear. And so I really believe that, but I think that's also a big opportunity in terms of the so what. And so if we're talking about the impact pathway, I think social science research is really crucial in terms of making change for the issues that we're talking about, the issues that are important for development, the issues that I know are important for USAID.
I'll leave in awkward silence and see if anyone else wants to jump in there.
I'm mainly just trying to think how to phrase this. I mean, social science doesn't have nice, neat outputs the way other sciences do. I mean, when we're talking about, say, peanuts in particular, you can come up with a new variety in a specific amount of time and have more or less an expectation of when it'll be done, what it's going to look like, hopefully what the impacts will be, maybe some of like its qualities, its benefits of being used. But social science isn't, it doesn't have a nice, neat package that's the outcome. The outcome can be a lot of things. The outcome could be, hey, look, we found this interesting gender thing where women and men do something totally different. And so there's an opportunity for education there that could really improve like the quality of the ground nuts. But then again, the outcome could also be, it's unless we like change the entire system, there's going to be no impact. And that's just the reality of social science work. But that being said, I mean, the methods that are used, I think, are definitely one of the outcomes, because they really should be integrated into almost every research, in my opinion. And then like Paige said, the outcome pathways, the project implications, the policy implications, they're all there. It's just they're not as clean as the hard sciences for outcomes, and they're not as easy. They might require a lot longer time and effort to change something. And they might require a lot more like investment in an area. And so it's just a much longer time way to like do this research. And it's a lot less clear what the outcome is going to be in the end. And then hopefully there's a path forward.
For sure, there's, yeah, it certainly is messy is a good word. Are there things, I mean, just like specific examples that are some like knowledge products that we could start to fit into those things, that maybe some specific examples from y'all's projects as you move forward in that? So what, like, how do we, within your project, how do you grapple with that? So what?
Well, I think especially in our project, if we're looking at empowering youth, the only way to get there is to ask those questions and have those conversations and get them engaged in the process. I think that is kind of the so what for us. I mean, they have this opportunity to take these beautiful photos and share them with the community and talk about what that means to them, but also us sitting down and interviewing those individuals, because they are going to be the future of the production side or whatever side you're looking at. So you might capture some in a survey, but you got to sit down and pick their brains and really find out what they're thinking and what they value and what their perspective is. And I just don't, for us, that has been a really awesome piece, is getting their voices and having their voices be heard and feeling like they are invested in.
I see. I know we've had pretty active chat. It's really hard for me to follow and read the chat things at the same time and see, but I know I've seen Soraya would like to ask a question, and I would welcome others if they would like to jump in and do that as well.
I would. I think it's nice to have a conversation between the sort of hard science and the social science per se, because I can see all discussing things, and I think you can understand each other in many ways. And personally, I feel there is a gap between what I understand about all you're doing. And I think one of the reasons is in what I'm doing in the project, it's very quantifiable, and we know what's right. We know what we want. We want a plant that is resistant to groundnut rosette virus. And we know that plant is going to be good. We know because it's going to produce more. I mean, it's not questionable. You know, we know that we may not get there, but, you know, we're working towards something that is unquestionably right. When we go to social sciences and culture, I can see the problem becomes much more complex, because what's right and what's wrong, and how to change a social structure, and do they want to be changed? Does that structure, we see it wrong as outsiders, but do the locals think it's wrong? You know, I'm curious about what the real goals are, and if the goals, one, are needed, two, are they wanted, three, is it realistic to change the structure? So I think these are things that sometimes I find a bit hard to grasp. And yeah, so that's my point, and I'd like to see if anyone can help me with that.
I don't know if I can directly answer your questions. If but linking what you're commenting and then also Jamie's previous question about products. I mean, for our project, as I mentioned earlier, one of our findings just from our initial data collection is that men don't recognize women's contributions to agriculture. And so what we're developing now is a farmer field school, and that curriculum could actually be used as a product, if you will, or something that could be shared in terms of creating wider impact. But it's also addressing this idea of I wouldn't say we've given value to how things are in terms of the context or structure, but just kind of recognizing those inequities and bringing those to light. And so through our farmer field schools, I think one of the things we're hoping is to open a dialogue among community members about the gender differences in production and maybe having a little bit more of that recognition that women are contributing to different aspects and including agricultural production, peanut production. And so, I think the change you're talking about is not something that can be happening overnight. And I know in gender research and applied gender research, the term gender transformative approaches gets thrown around a lot. I don't know if we're kind of in that flipping a switch, so to speak. It's more slow and, it needs to engage with the community members rather than it be top down. So.
For that change, that change, I think that that's why earlier I talk about the cultural aspect, and to know exactly, as you say, we know exactly what we need, what is need to be done. I think that knowing the cultural aspect of that population may help people to adopt that new technology that we trying to implement or to trying to give them. For instance, for the project of retaining next generation farmers, we found on our results that the soil is degraded. The soil doesn't have any nutrient and other kind of stuff. So what we're trying to do is to find a way to enhance the power of that soil. So the technology that we're trying to use at that time is in that area where we're doing the study. So by using the technology that is available in that area, I think that the adoption of that technology will be more impactful and more will be widely used by the population. For instance, when we talk about manure and other kind of stuff, manure is available everywhere, but sometimes they don't have that manure is not available in that area, but they know exactly that the manure is really good. So by handing them such technology, I think that the adoption will be welcome by people. So when we're trying to change from the beginning to the end, I mean from one club trying to change everything for what they were doing before, it would be a little bit difficult to give them it would be difficult for them to receive that technology, to welcome that technology, that new technology we're trying to implement.
Thanks, Pierre. It's very good to hear from you who are in the trenches. But you're talking about technology adoption. Which I think it obviously is very important and that's needed, and there are ways to do that, which is beyond what we do in the lab or in the field. Is more extension work. how would the social work, in terms of what is being discussed in terms of equity or gender roles, etc., how would that benefit your area?
So this is an interesting question because it's multifold. I mean, the question of adopting, say, a new technology versus inequalities, they don't seem on the surface to be completely connected, but they are. When we're talking about farmer adoption, are we talking about men's farmer adoption? Are we talking about women's? Are we talking about young people or old people? And the place for social science really is to come in and help identify that. I mean, anecdotally, I have, experience working with farmers in the very far eastern part of Senegal, where they were asked if they would invest in fertilizer if it was heavily subsidized, and the farmers all said no, because they didn't trust it. They didn't have any information on it. They knew it came from the government, and that was it. And that was good enough for them to not trust it. And that's a difficult position to be in, like even if the farmers, trusted it, why wouldn't they? If the farmers don't trust it, they're not going to accept it. They're just not going to invest in it, even if it would greatly increase their yields. And then I have a friend who's worked a long time in Bangladesh, who they started investing in something called vertical farming. And at first, no one trusted it. No one thought that it would be useful. No one wanted to use it. No one even really wanted to find out more about it. But what they did was they ended up going in and really working with a couple of communities, specifically the women in the communities, to show them how the vertical farming worked and how it would continue producing crops even if the area got very flooded. And then they wouldn't have lost all that they invested in. And so the women started taking it up because they were really concerned about having food security for their families. And when not only the women were succeeding with this vertical cropping, but outperforming the men started adopting it too. And that was, a result of finding out that the women were more open to something like a new technology because it would help feed their families. And so I think when we talk about technology adoption and gender inequalities, we're really also talking about what are the pathways to getting people to accept new technologies, and how are we trying to find ways in which it will create the maximum benefit for both men and women.
Thank you.
Other comments along? I see we're having some pretty interesting conversations in the chat as well related to, the balance of behavior change versus being overtly normative from an outsider's perspective. And Jeremy had an interesting question. It prompted me to think about, so we've been working with, so Jeremy Venable's in there, and we've been working with the AgDiv project, which is USAID mission funded project in Malawi, and very actively converting tobacco farmers, which is almost, I think, 95% male head of households who manage the contracts themselves. And because peanut, for example, is often considered a women's crop, given our survey question earlier on there, we were kind of wondering, well, what does that mean in the context if we're switching to a commercialization strategy around peanut? What are the potential impacts of that? And interestingly, these tobacco companies converting are no longer just tobacco companies. They're working at other things. And they said, well, we'll fix that because we'll just put, all of our contracts are greater than 60% will be with women. And it was like, wow, what would be the implications down the line? And I think that's, where some of the challenges in social science could be, in looking at what's the impact of that, first of all, if it was going to, and then kind of thinking through what are the potential impacts and maybe how to structure the policies that would be positive and less negative. I know there was comments earlier in the chat box about, especially around gender relations in particular, kind of a do no harm approach, because and this balance of commercialization versus peanut as a sort of a household level consumption crop brings a lot of questions. And trying to get to a good question out of all those, contexts. And I think it's hard for me often. My background training was in anthropology. My brain gets really wrapped up in just context. And like every country is so unique, every community really in some cases. And related to that and thinking of scaling, we had a question around Carrie's project in particular, as the methodology is really a participatory one aimed at empowerment or engagement and empowerment, and thinking about what's the scalability of applied social sciences and empowerment, and how we can maybe think about that within all the other projects as well. Carrie, I'm mostly thinking about like we contribute to an academic, endpoint as people in the academy, where our endpoint is often peer-reviewed journal articles, and that's the currency by which we're working. But within USAID and where we sit at the ME, that's it's very secondary to what our objectives are, is to end up with a peer-reviewed paper, but yet we still have to remain some scientific rigor. And so I thought about your project in particular, where there's this direct objective of using a social science tool for empowerment. And I thought you might have comments and thoughts on that.
So is your question around how effective is it, or because the way when we were putting together the project, obviously you can ask somebody and have a conversation and they can tell you maybe what empowers them, but actually triggering the brain to take photos, then to have to think about it, to put a caption and then explain that process, I think can inform researchers, okay, this is what these individuals really think about when it comes to the peanut value chain or community engagement. But it also has been interesting because a couple of our graduate students on the Macareri team have used Photo Voice to look at maybe the economic side or the food safety side, using Photo Voice as well. So from an agriculture perspective, even with the peanut value chain, we can see what they really think about that and where the gaps are in that process as well. So I just think about it in terms of empowering the youth, in terms of allowing them to, think about the process, be able to capture that and speak to it. It's a cool methodology, but it also has informed us where some gaps lie within that peanut value chain system that, David Okello, I don't know if he's still on here, but has also been part of this process in working with the youth on the production side. So I think that also is informing him maybe where some of the gaps are that they think about as well. Did that answer your question, Jamie?
I'm not sure I even formed it really as a question, more than just inviting comments and on the topic. So yeah, I appreciate your thoughts. And I'd like to open it beyond. I know there's a lot of activity in the chat, and it's hard for me to engage intellectually with some of those questions and then turn them into actual questions over here as it shows. But if there's others out there, Sari, I appreciate your questions and particularly maybe from folks in the sort of bench sciences or STEM fields, if they had questions of our panelists, that they've thought of while we've been discussing about the rigor, the value of their work, or other folks around, just I'm happy to throw it out there. I see, Greg, you've turned your video on. Do you have a question?
It just seems like that maybe we come up with all these research protocols and all of these things that we say we need to test, but I don't know where the question comes from to begin with as to why we're testing what we're testing. And maybe we should do some exploratory socially first to see what people want before we go ahead and I mean, everybody assumes, well, if you got a brand new variety, they're going to use it because it's better. It's just automatic. I mean, and I've done similar things in Haiti and in Guyana where you sit there and say, I don't know why they're not doing this. It just doesn't make any sense. And yet things aren't adopted. So that's my 2 cents.
I love to hear that. Thanks so much for those comments. If I could just kind of jump back to what I think, Jamie, you were talking about when you were talking about the promotion of peanuts, maybe over tobacco or other crops. And I think one risk is that women's labor, women's participation in agriculture, particularly if it's with a crop traditionally like peanuts, is that it's going to be co-opted once it's marketed. And so I think, one key issue and something that I think the team that I'm part of is working towards is really having a gendered lens, gender analysis to what we're doing. And if you don't address in an open and participatory way the gender inequities within a household, you're not going to be able to address, some of those processes in terms of crops being co-opted or taken over. And so, whether we have nominally included 80% women, if we're not talking about those dynamics within a household, then things aren't going to necessarily change. And so I think, relating back to what Carrie's sharing about empowerment and for youth, I think we have kind of a similar approach in terms of addressing these gender inequities. I would just also add, I think a lot of times gender and youth and social science research gets thrown out as like a big umbrella, and there's a lot of differences within that umbrella. So even, gender and youth can be have different approaches with a lot of things in common, but a lot of things that are different too. So I think that's really important from kind of an outside perspective to understand that social science research is very diverse in itself, and there's a lot of different approaches or scholarship that can be applied to different contexts depending on what you're looking at.
I know we started a bit early and we're coming up on, I see, on our time. I will save my last comment maybe. And David Okello, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. I'm enjoying the discussion. The issue of bringing the social scientists together with the biophysical scientists actually to have, in the long run, have a very good effect on the adoption story. Bringing them on board at the start so that, you create the impact together instead of bringing them at the end. What is traditionally done makes the adoption story not complete, and it makes even their services look like a consultancy. But if you bring them as a crop improvement team together and you walk them through, it becomes quite informative. And then, this one here, if you enshrine it with the gender issues, if we start by collecting who is in the house, who should be in the house at the product conception, you have a higher chance of making sure that the technology you're generating actually should be impactful. There are issues like, for example, if you have a technology, let's say seed, which needs a fertilizer, and then they release it to the community. Yet you find that the resource decision and the resource endowment, differs across gender. So you could find that, for instance, if the men are the one who control the resources, and then you have seed which need fertilizer, who need some biopesticide, it would make that the female don't pick that technology because they don't have the decision to take off the resources. And then, all the idea of, example, having mechanization, you could be displacing labor, and then you don't capture them in there. So the do no harm approach in some of these technologies need to be looked at. We have seen in the Photo Voice project, for instance, the youth which we train and we gave them, the phones to go and take the pictures out there. They are slowly turning out to be the change agents in the community. They're taking pictures which shows the agronomic practices which are not being used, as we recommend them. Yet we believe that there is an extension system which should take that technology from research and give it to the community. So the issue of empowerment of the youth, empowering of the gender, actually, if we enshrine some of all these things in our technology development process, probably we would have impact to research. Some of these things needs probably long-term approach, but if we could generate data which can inform policy, we would be somewhere. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, there's a lot there for sure. I think in particular, was just resonating with me as a point we made earlier about, the preliminary, the fact that we need to shape research or have engagement, interdisciplinary engagement early on to help shape it. And it's a challenge sometimes, I know, for teams, preparing to respond to an RFA where they may not know that much about the context, or they, it's easier if you're saying, I've got a breeding program and we're going to develop these varieties for that location. It's a little bit more straightforward than if you're in a social science context and coming into saying, like, we want to do something in Ghana, but we don't know that much about what's happening there. And so it's also a challenge, like within the structure of how the innovation labs work, where you've got to have kind of a fully formed idea, and hopefully the fact that we have these long-term relationships developing and burgeoning, that we, some of the data's out there and we can continue on to build on what's already been done. And in some ways, that's part of the point around maybe a bit of our uniqueness as well. For Rick's comment I see about, if you have all these sort of big lumped together projects and you say, well, what about the social scientist, or, gender is important as a cross-cutting issue, or youth, but we need to put it just, some bit of the budget, and it ends up being not enough to really do much of anything. And I think that's one thing we as the ME are thinking about a lot too, is that, and I heard this specifically from the person who manages a lot of the gender programs in one of the other innovation labs, where they just put it as a cross-cutting issue. And they said, 5 to 10% of all these projects doesn't add up to much of anything that we can actually do of value. And so hopefully having these standalone projects with enough resources to really do something and time to develop it, I hope that the results are meaningful in that. I know we're kind of coming to an end, and I see a few other folks have popped on. Are there other thoughts, questions?
I think the approach of the PNIL to have focused social science projects allows for more detailed and rigorous research in these areas. And so I really commend the ME for these projects, and for investing in what we believe we know is really important. But to make a statement like that, to say that it's really important, I think it's very much appreciated, and I think valuable as well.
Well, I think with that, I will conclude our panel discussion here. I think in some ways there's so many topics, and some of them are so big, it's hard to really drill down into any of them specifically. So I would like to thank our panelists for jumping on, and certainly for some of the other folks coming in with questions as well. And I'm sure these will continue to be the challenges with us at the ME and communicating it, some of these so what issues. And I'm really excited about the results that are starting to generate across the project. So we're really looking forward to, the reports as they come in, and figuring out how to really translate those to some kind of product and the so what. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, for stepping in. And we hope that Jessica will recover quickly and can be part of the rest of the discussion over the next couple of days. And yeah, thanks to all the panels for agreeing to have this conversation. I think that there were some really good examples of what we've been able to learn from having specific research projects on gender and youth. But I think just being able to have this dialogue is one of the great benefits. And we've got some new thinking, new perspectives, new partners that, as was said by several, would not have gotten involved in peanut research if not being part of our lab and having a specific research project. So So I think that's really good. And I appreciated all the comments and discussion, lots of good things to think about. This isn't the last time we're going to talk about it. Like I said, a lot of our panel discussions or invited lectures and presentations are really to kind of set the stage for our breakout rooms. And so there'll be at least 3 of our breakout rooms talking about the roles at gender and the roles at youth, and even what are products and product life cycles for social science research starting tomorrow afternoon and continuing on Thursday. So many of you will be able to continue this discussion and dialogue. So really good, a really good start to that process. We've also obviously captured not only the session recording, but all the chat, and we'll be assembling that and making sure that we can benefit from it as well. So I think we're at the end of our first day, right on time for day 1. And appreciate everybody being on today and making presentations. We'll start promptly again tomorrow morning at 10 with our introduction videos. But as we did this morning, those who would like to log in around 9:30, there'll be a lot of us online and a good chance to chat among ourselves. So I think with that, we'll end for today and look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Goodbye, everybody. Au revoir. Au revoir. Goodbye.
It was actually pretty awful.
Au revoir, bon après-midi.
So it's over now, but apparently there is something going around.
Ouais.
Even getting
À bientôt. À demain.
Bye.
like, I don't know how we would have been exposed. In fact, there's one thing that I did. I took my son to urgent care last Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember, because he had these.
I'm still on because I'm checking with the translators to make sure all went on. Everyone, the meeting is over. Some of us from the ME are still around, and I am going to meet with our translators briefly, but thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thanks, Kristen. Awesome job. All these complex parts fitting together. Appreciate your organization behind it.
Yes. All right. Amanda, Velma, Bay, Justice, did y'all have questions or just hanging around to say hello? We're so glad to see you here. The meeting is over if you don't have any other questions. God love, I want to talk with you briefly just to make sure translation went okay. Do I need to switch over to the French channel to be able to hear you? I am. Yes. How was everything? Okay. All right. How many people were in the room at a given time on average, would you say? In the French audio